This is Coda Radio, episode 130 for December 1st, 2014. Hi everyone, and welcome to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, DigitalOcean and Linux Academy. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our excellent host on the East Coast, Mr. Michael Dominic. Hey there, Michael.
Welcome.
Welcome. This is the Coda Radio Germany edition. Oh boy, I have a bad accent. I can't even do it a little bit.
You sound a little bit like Colonel Klink from Hogan's Heroes.
Yeah, that's
which,
probably
you know,
my...
is alright. All you have to say is, and Hogan!
And I'm good, right? I'm covered. I feel dirty today. I'm a little sad. It's like it's one part like a really good day, and then one part a really bad day. Like, I'll start with the bad stuff, and then I'll end it with a good like, happy ending. And chat room, don't forget to bang suggest as we go along. Chat room, we need your title suggestions. We got a big hoopla we're going to get to today. You'll probably get your titles later in the show. But
I don't believe in happy endings. In fact, I've recently seen an executive order granting legal status to unhappy endings.
Okay. Well, I think that might be in the... I hear your dog's fired up in the background, too. They're pacing
Yeah, my dog is a strong Tea Partier. He's got one of those three-pointed hats on right now. He's kind of upset.
Oh, man. I feel, today I had big plans. All year long, I've been wanting to get a big TV for the studio because we have guests over from time to time, and it's always ironic. They come over to a production studio, and then we can't, show them the stuff we do or watch anything because we don't... All our displays are, for editing or, in the studio for doing shows. We don't actually have any way to watch anything outside of our offices and studios. So I thought this year, Cyber Monday comes along, gonna get me a TV. And you know what? My truck decided it needed a whole bunch of work, and that's where all my Cyber Monday money went. So that's the bad part. However, the good part, Mr. Dominic, is I had a really good chat with Mark Shuttleworth in Sunday's Linux Action Show. And one of the topics that came up was one we've talked about here on the show before. And then today, I had a great interview with Lennart Pottering, and we had a discussion about some trolling things and, if how that's been and if it's sort of demotivated him from working on open source projects and things like that. So it's some good talks, too. We got some good stuff out in the air. So it's like a mixed day for me. I'm a bit of a mess. How's it on the East Coast?
Well, the IRS went shopping for Cyber Monday in my wallet. It was not great. If you've ever seen the movie where the guy gets mugged, it is like that movie.
I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Dominic.
I blame the Democratic Party and, of course, the Republican Party.
Good, enough blame to go around. Well,
there's plenty to go around.
So a topic from last week's episode that you might have guessed got quite a bit of feedback. So let's get into the feedback. I talked about how I kind of wanted to redo the Jupiter Broadcasting website, perhaps go CMS free if possible. Well, Fabian, and a lot of other people wrote in. But Fabian wrote in. He says, "Hey, Chris, I heard you talking about redoing your website without the need of a complex CMS like Drupal or WordPress. Everything you want can be done with Pico CMS. Oh," he says, "you can transfer out your Markdown files in their current folder, and they'll just be added to your menu as they show up as pages for your web page. No need for databases, just flat files. Heck, you can even SSH into your server and write your own Markdown via Vim or Emacs. Need to migrate even faster? Just copy that folder. Here's a double bonus. Your co-host on TechSnap, Alan, he also uses it to power bsdnow.tv. You can find it at picocms.org. Greetings, Fabian." So I've heard of Pico CMS, and it's kind of one of our forerunners right now. And the BSD Now site runs on it. So just to recap, because I'm kind of crowdsourcing ideas, is the idea would be for a 2015 edition of the Jupiter Broadcasting website. We migrate off of a CMS. It's just flat files, serving up the video and the links to download the audio files and all that stuff, maybe even an audio player, but real basic. But while I want the functionality of the publishing of the site to be really crazy basic, just flat text, no databases, derived from Markdown with Possible, so that way we can automate the publishing process from encode to publish, one thing I would like ideas on from the audience is what we could do to make it attractive to app developers. Like this morning, I was thinking about our show schedule feed that tells you when shows are going to be live and how it can change. And it would be really nice if that was like a feed that was available to the people that are making our Roku apps, our XBMC apps, the Android apps, all those different ones that they could use when they're developing their applications to make them even better. And maybe like a notification system for new releases and that kind of stuff would be. So I'm trying to think of, I want to keep the website really clean and simple. I want to make it easy to like move around if we need to. And I want to make sure that it's just really, it's just getting you the content. That's all it has to do. But I'd also like to have some of this functionality that I think traditionally you would derive from a CMS. And without the CMS. So I'm looking for ideas on things that not only we could do to empower developers to make better apps around Jupiter Broadcasting, but the ways we could do that. So if you have any suggestions, I would love to hear it. Shoot us some feedback. And along those same lines, Benjamin writes in, and actually I think Wade did too. A couple of people wrote in about Hugo. Now get this, Mr. Dominic, get ready for this. This is going to impress you. He says, hello, Chris and Mike, regarding your wish to move away from CMSs. You may want to take a look at Hugo, a static site generator written in Go. Get it, Hugo? The advantage over other static site generators like Jekyll is that rebuilding the site after an article update, for example, is much faster. And keep up the good work, he says. So he linked it to us. It's gohugo.io. Boy, that's clever. Gohugo.io. I'm going to go there right now. Well, look at this. It says, make the web fun again, introducing Hugo, a new idea around making website creation simple again. Hugo flexibly works with many formats and is ideal for blogs, docs, portfolios, and much more. Hugo's speed fosters creativity and makes building websites fun again. Run anywhere. It's quite possibly the easiest install software you've ever used. Simply download and run. Hugo doesn't depend on administrative privileges, databases, runtimes, interpreters, or external libraries. Sites built with Hugo can run and be deployed on S3, GitHub, GitHub Pages, Dropbox, or any web host. This is really fascinating. So there's currently the contenders are Pico CMS and Hugo. And if you have any ways that we could, any ideas, thoughts on ways we could extend this to make it better for developers, I would really love to hear ideas. Mr. Dominic, is anything on this topic jump into mind for you on ways we can improve the site?
I'm not the Jupiter Broadcasting site or Hugo?
No, the Jupiter, and things we could do to make it more appealing for people to write applications for us. Like if you were going to make a JB app that like gave, the ability to watch the live feed, check the calendar. Maybe.
Oh, do you have an API that returns JSON?
Well, like some of the things like do that, like the Google Calendar technically from Google Calendar returns.
No. I mean, it's like an overarching JB API that returns JSON.
No, there's not. And that's what I'm worried about. Pico CMS is kind of like killing that potential. So I'm wondering how you build that on top of. I want to keep the system really lean and simple, but I want to have some nice features and functionality.
Yeah, I mean, you just rewrite it in Rails, dude.
Nicola is also another option. Dude, no, I don't want to do that.
Really?
No way.
It writes itself, Chris.
You mean all I have to do is just sprinkle code on the ground and then it grows itself?
Chris, if your heart is pure and you believe, it will write itself.
See, the whole idea really was to try to super simplify it so a series of scripts could do the publishing, so that way we could, increase the volume without having to increase dramatic workload.
Yeah, but why not just have fun and, write code that makes women swoon and grown men weep?
Oh, Ruby does that?
Yes, of course.
Oh, okay. So you think what it is we need like a Jupiter Broadcasting wide API?
Oh, in all seriousness, you definitely need that, whether it's in Ruby or not, and it pretty much has to return JSON because unless you're a savage.
Right.
Yeah. Why not some PHP goodness? I mean, realistically, you could do it in Cake PHP. Sorry, I hate it so much I can't say it. What is it? PHP. There we go.
PH. You gotta say it like that. HP.
I'm sorry. Is it PHP?
Oh, it's so gross.
That sounded amazing through the microphone, I'm sure.
Yeah, it did. Oh, wow. Well, okay. So this is something I need some, Nicola and Pico use PHP, Rotten Corpse is saying in the chat room.
Or you can always go with the pinnacle of open source technology. ASP MVC5, baby.
Of course. The new hotness, as we also call it, the kids call it now. The new hotness.
I call it the big VC.
Why? Because big VCs fund you when you write your apps in it?
Historically, no.
Oh, but they're going to.
We'll see.
Yeah, okay. So there you go. There's enough about the Jupiter Broadcasting website for your faces. I would like your smart thoughts on that. Go to jupiterbroadcasting.com/contact, or even
Notice
better.
how he said smart thoughts, therefore discounting all of my comments so far.
No, I think you nailed it. I just curious how to pull it off. Coderradio.reddit.com would also be a good spot
So
to go.
it's currently in WordPress, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of a bitch.
Mm-hmm. And it's silly stuff like that will kind of break, and it also just there's an administration overhead to WordPress that none of us really have the time for.
Well, and WordPress is like the Windows XP of the internet, right? Like if your site is going to get attacked, it's almost certainly going to get attacked via WordPress.
And it's just so unnecessary. Like I don't know, like if what we were thinking early on. I think it was started because it was easy. Maybe.
Yeah, that's how everybody. I mean, we deploy WordPress sites for people when it's like, oh, we need a marketing page for our app or whatever, or like a help page. But I
mean, there's some big sites that do run on WordPress. I mean, that is a thing. But it's so much more than we need.
And at that point, they've customized it and wrote their own code that.
Yeah.
Unless you were like a dedicated PHP WordPress guy, I'm not sure that makes a whole lot of sense.
Right. And that was sort of my thoughts on it. It sort of seemed like let's sort of reanalyze what we use our website for. And it's really just to present the shows. That's all it really has to do. But I would like services and feeds to come off of that.
So how does it work with Scale Engine though? Because then the other concern is going to be scalability, right? Like
well, yes, but that keeping it all text and stuff like that is going to make it even easier, right? It'll make it even faster. And
you do want to do it all? Okay.
Yeah, well, Scale Engine will take care of the caching, so it can cache the files out on the edge, and it'll actually be nice and clean. I just and like I don't ever want to have to go update my website again for security fixes. It's just I don't need all that functionality.
Well, with any framework, you're going to have to keep your shit up to date, right? Like,
but if it's updating a few packages, fine.
Right. It would be like apt-get update Rails or apt-get update Cake.
See, there's the other route. Like the good folks over at Twit right now are also redoing their website for separate reasons, and they're kind of going the opposite direction. And it's an interesting, compelling idea. So they've been running on Drupal forever. And they have just not ever been happy with the way Drupal renders, the way it looks. They've just never really been happy, even though they hired designers. They've always had issues. So now their idea is to do what they're calling, quote-unquote, a headless Drupal, right? Where you have the CMS and the back end of Drupal, and then you build a website, and they're building it in Node.js to access that functionality through an API. That same API will be available to all the developers. So the API that the site will use to interact with the back end of Drupal will be the same API available to everybody, and their website will just be another client to that. And headless Drupal sounds neat because you get the benefits of a CMS management system with your own customized front end. But the problem is, I don't have a staff of 30. And I don't really feel like my site needs to do any of that. It really just needs to get the content in front of people.
Yeah, and I wonder if they didn't have so much legacy in Drupal, would they have gone headless Drupal and not just like, some app, right?
Because it solves that whole migration problem. And...
Right, so they don't have to do the migration. That's what it is, right? Yeah. They don't have to handle that. I'm looking at their new site.
No judgment.
Is this their new or their old?
No, that's their old one. That's their old one. No judgment on Drupal or WordPress. I think they're both fine for jobs they do. They're just not they're not the ones I want.
I think the problem with all the CMSs tends to be, though, and it seems like the problem Twit has fairly successfully solved, once you're in them, and you're stuck. And it's super painful to get out.
Right.
I mean, I guess any framework's going to have that problem. But, yeah, Chris, you're screwed. Have fun.
Help me, Obi-Wan, audience. You're my only hope. You see the new Star Wars trailer?
I did, and I have to say that how many people have had their hands cut off? Of course he put a hand guard on his lightsaber.
I know, right?
I mean, it's idiotic that no one thought of it before, really.
Yep. I was looking at that thinking that, of course. It's like seatbelts in Star Trek. Somebody should do... They finally did that, in Star Trek. They did seatbelts, but they cut the scene out of Nemesis. It's in the outtakes. Hey, so we're done talking about us, or at least the website. But we have a couple more emails to get to. First, though, I think I'll stop and thank our first sponsor. Seems about the right time. And that's Linux Academy. Linux Academy is a continuing sponsor of the Coder Radio program for a couple of specific reasons. You guys are exactly the right audience. Those of you who, there's a couple of people I think that fall under that umbrella. Those of you who now find themselves in that DevOps category that my co-host Alan on TechSnap refuses to believe exists, but I know you're out there. They've really got a lot of great courseware for you. Those of you who just want to move your skills forward, they've got a lot of great courseware for you as well. And the reason is, Linux Academy is created by people who understand the Linux ecosystem. They understand the development process because they're developers themselves, and they've used this technology in production. plus educators who have implemented training courses on this in the past. They came together and created Linux Academy from scratch a while ago now, and it's grown more and more because they really do that job very well. That's what they do. It's their bag, and they nail it like nobody else. So go over to linuxacademy.com/coders. That'll get you the Coder Radio discount. Jump in, check out the courseware. You can choose from 7+ Linux distributions. It'll automatically adjust all the courseware to match that. It's super slick. Downloadable comprehensive study guides. You can study offline. You can read it at your own pace. You can listen to the content, watch the videos. They have live streams that incorporate all of this. They have scenario-based labs that'll actually get you hands-on in virtual machines deploying this technology. You can get instructor help whenever you need it. They have a community that'll help boost you along if you ever slow down a little bit and need that extra motivation. They have tons of great OpenStack courses. New courseware on Puppet being added too. It's really a lot of good stuff. Go over to Linux Academy right now. linuxacademy.com/coders. Go sign up for a little while, maybe through the holidays. Don't worry about not having the time. They also have the ability for you to go in, plug in how much time you have available. They call it the learning plan. You say, I have this much time free this week. It will custom build you courseware that matches that availability, help you with reminders for quizzes. You can go back in, see exactly how long this section is going to take. You can do recaps to see if you've forgotten anything. It's the perfect time to polish up those Python skills, those OpenStack skills, Android development skills, or really truly buckle down on that DevOps position that you've been sort of skirting around. linuxacademy.com/coder. There's really never been a better time to train yourself and get better as the new year approaches. It might be a great little incentive there, too. There's lots of good courseware on AWS as well. I'm just looking at their list of all these AWS Certified Developer, AWS Certified SysOps Administrator, AWS Certified Solutions Architect, and more. They got all of them there. And they have all this information broken out on their website as well, with in-depth resources that are available to you all of the time, practice exams, detailed notes ready to go, your own Linux servers. You can easily follow along, say, the DevOps, advanced training, or run multiple distributions at the same time, try out different things. Have fun with real Linux servers. It's all part of the Linux Academy package. It's really awesome. Their enhanced learning plans are unique as well. Go check it out, linuxacademy.com/coders. And a big, big thank you to Linux Academy for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. linuxacademy.com/coders. All right, Mr. Dominic. Our next email comes in from P. Lorenzo. And he has a question that I almost wonder if he knows the answer to, but I'd like to hear your take on this. And I wonder what this would all apply to. He says, I have a project I've been working on over the course of the last 5 years, so I've committed some good time to working on it, and I've enjoyed it, or else, I probably wouldn't have continued. I've run into a situation where a foreign company is using the same name as my product or project to sell their product. Long ago, I decided to open source my project and only make money by donation. I don't feel right about having this other company making money using my name, but I'm unsure there's much I could do about it, or much that my project can afford to do about it. Should I trademark my project's name? And or how should I attempt at resolving this issue with another company? And hearing this, I'm reminded of something that happened to a friend of mine many years ago. What is your stance on trademarks and all of that hassle, Mr. Dominic?
I don't know. I usually defer to my attorney. One thing I will say is usually things like that tend to be very country specific. So like your trademark might be good in the US, but in India or like in particular China, right, it's not going to hold up. I try not to worry about that. Having said that, there have been cases where I've been frustrated with things that are maybe too close to names I've used or too close to fingertips, stuff like that. And I've actually, for instance, there was a company over in Asia that has a similar name to us and does totally different work. But a lot of indexing sites keep getting us confused because, so they'll put like their website and our address, which is super frustrating because one of the main things we're selling is US-based software development. And when the freaking website says, I think it's like somewhere in China, it's led to uncomfortable conversations during the sales cycle. So we actually had to, believe it or not, call businessweek.com and like demand that they take it down with our Duns and Bradstreet number and everything. Really? Which was kind of a hassle because they're like, listen, we don't care about small companies. Right. I was like, listen, then don't index us at all. We prefer, honestly, this whole, the SEO discussion's a whole different thing. I think SEO is kind of a double-edged sword. The more visibility you have, it's very good for you, but it can also be kind of terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is an interesting thing, isn't it?
It's hard, right? Because so my understanding cases with past customers is if the violation would cause market confusion, you might have a case. But one, not a lawyer, speak to an attorney. Two, once things are international, once it's not, um, for instance, this other company I'm referencing, if they had been a company, let's say out of Pennsylvania, right, I could have forced them to change their name.
Right. Yes.
But since they're in Asia, a C&D doesn't do a whole lot.
Right. I actually I watched the opposite thing happen. So I had an old friend who named his really great educational software Basmati. It was an online attendance and grade checking software way before there was any system like that. Written in PHP, MySQL, running on a Debian Apache box. It was truly the first of its kind. And it was neat, and it took off because of that. Because the person who created it was an educator, a teacher, he decided it wasn't going to be his full-time gig, so he open sourced it and then made, kind of went the traditional route, pay for my installation and consulting and future improvements. And it worked okay for him. The issue that he ran into was the Basmati rice company. I think that is I don't they're not their headquarters is not in the US. And I don't think it was anywhere in Europe. But anyways, that doesn't matter. What matters is they sent him a cease and desist, and I don't think he technically had to do it. I mean, it became an issue for him, but they were so far out of the type of software, they weren't doing software, they were doing rice, and he's doing software. So it's a totally different category. There's not really market confusion, and he's in the U.S., they're outside the U.S. Well, I don't think he ever changed it.
Yeah, my understanding is product names are easier to defend. Company names can be hard, though. So even if, let's say somebody opened a new Fingertip Tech Inc. in Pennsylvania doing, digging up rocks, right?
Yes. That's the difference with the company, right?
They would have to get a waiver from us to use the name.
Okay. That makes more sense.
Now they could, their rock fucking digging tool could be called CoJournal, and we can't do a damn thing about that.
That would be a bad name for a rock digger.
No, but I know. Or
yeah,
or
I know.
To be honest with you, one thing I'm finding to the writer is every time you talk to a lawyer, God kills a kitten. It just seems like no one wins but the lawyers. So do you feel, if they copied your software outright or were there a competitor using a similar name, then yes, by all means, guns blazing. But, if you're doing whatever you're doing and they're doing something totally different, right? If they're doing like a Candy Crush clone that happens to have a similar name, I would consider if you care.
What happened to JB a couple of weeks ago is somebody started a Teespring campaign on a shirt with the Linux Action Show logo on it.
See, now that's screwed up because that you actually own. There's one Linux Action Show.
Right. Yeah. And so, I had to sit back and go, what do I do about this? How much of a dick do I be? And do I need to be a dick at all?
You kind of do, right? Because you have to defend the trademark.
The route we ended up taking, and it was sort of unnecessary since the campaign wasn't successful, but the route we ended up taking was we contacted Teespring and said, hey, that's not us doing this. That is our logo. And it wasn't a successful campaign anyway, so they shut it down. But that was a little odd. I had a moment where I go, oh, really? Do I have to be this guy now? I don't want to be that guy. Don't make me be that guy. Because that's the last thing I want to have to worry about. Hey, you know what? Speaking of legitimate wares, well, I probably should mention this because it's like we got 1 day left. The Jupiter Broadcasting Polo, it's serious. It's for real. Real talk, you guys. It's so amazing. The logo is embroidered in, so it looks super nice and clean. And the material has this nice heavy feel to it. And it's also like, as somebody who has bad luck at lunch, and I always drop food on my shirt, I had salsa dripped on it the other day because I was wearing one of the trial ones. Wipes right off. It's that type of material. They have a ladies polo available as well. And I really like the colors we have. It's the Jupiter Broadcasting Polo. It's like, hey, give you guys something to wear to work for the ladies and the gentlemen. 1 day, 7 hours. Go to jupiter.gift to find it. We also have the Linux Action Show hooded jacket, which did meet its goal. So the Polo is at 78 towards 100 right now, sold. So the Polo may or may not make it. If it doesn't make 100, it probably won't. But the jacket, it already made its goal. And, actually, I think it's too late. You could always go and say you want one and it might reopen. But jupiter.gift to get the Polo. And we also have a Tech Talk Today hoodie. And if you order it in the next day, It'll actually get in there. It'll at least get there in time for Christmas. I don't know about other holidays, but it'll get there in time for Christmas, and you can have Teespring ship it right to the recipient. That's Jupiter.gift for that. Speaking of legitimate swag and illegitimate swag. Okay, so EB's our next email and our last email today before we get into the topic that may make Mr. Dominic's eyes fill with fire and rage. EB wrote in, and his topic about our comments resonating with him resonated with me. He says, Chris, your comments about hitting a rut and waiting and wandering off into burnout really resonated with me. This is from last week's episode. I found, however, that no matter how successful and happy you are with your career and home life, it's easy to feel as though you are stuck in a prison of your own making. Little things start to become huge irritants, and you start to lose sight of what drew you to the life you have now. Mostly, though, through trial and error, I've learned that I have to physically remove myself from that environment for a while, usually a day or two every couple of months, to put things back into focus. Ideally, the time is spent doing something that has little as possible to do with the day job. Kind of a mini walkabout. EB. So the reason why this resonated with me is I took 2 days off last week. I took Thanksgiving Day, Thursday, and Friday off. I actually worked for like 15 minutes on Friday, but, I've never, ever taken 2 days off since last Thanksgiving, I think. I think it's been at least a year since I've had 2 days off. And and then the other thing about that it wasn't just 2 days of me sitting around, being a dork. It was me going out and having conversations with normal folk, the family, and talking to them about stuff that it was, even though it had nothing to do with the shows, it provided a lot of interesting insights into some of the topics that we talk about, because it was, for me, fascinating to see how pervasive smartphones are in the family, technology like Uber and how Uber works and how the rating systems work, and all of these nuances about the apps are now very understood by people that I would consider to be very average users. Some of them maybe even only use a computer a couple of times a week kind of people, and otherwise all of their time is on their smart device. And so stepping outside of my work, stepping outside of this environment, going out and talking to people, it gave me a lot of insights for the topics that we often cover when the last thing I expected was anything productive for work. And it does help refocus the mind. It does help give you perspective on your day-to-day task. And it's one of these things where when I'm really busy and I'm really stressed out and I could need that perception the most, that's when it's the hardest time to convince myself to step away. But it turns out to be the best time to step away. So EB, it just resonated with me, man. Just sometimes you got to step away and go walk the dogs, right, Mr. Dominic? Go walk the dog.
Go walk the dog. Make a turkey club.
Make a turkey club, that's for sure. Do you have anything that you do that just gets you away from work completely, or is that something that you don't quite have mastered?
I'm sorry. There is a place other than work.
Hey-o! Sometimes you forget, right?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of books.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, something that totally takes the mind up. And I'll sometimes use podcasts for that too. Or like a Netflix series.
I actually just listened to a great book on audible.com.
Oh yeah, what was it?
This is a non-paid advertisement.
I have a pick too.
When Paris Went Dark.
Ooh, that sounds ominous. I'm going to go look it up right now.
Yeah, it's a history of the Nazi occupation of Paris during World War II.
Oh, I love that stuff.
Yep.
So it's real then? It's based on a real story?
Oh yeah, it's history. Like it's written by a historian.
Sold.
He cites his sources.
I'll put a link to that in the show notes too. And I think we still have an Audible affiliate, so I'll put the affiliate link in there.
What's really interesting is he focuses on how it affected all different stratums of like Parisian society.
Should I? You know what? Why don't I play a quick sample of it? Why the hell not?
Go ahead.
Okay, I will. So
the Nazis had been evil, and Europe and America had done well to rid that continent of Hitler and his cohort. Though blind to our own partial answers about contemporary social change, we were, on the other hand, confidently in solidarity about the German occupation of France. I remember, too, that while roaming France and Paris, I would frequently find myself before some centrally located monument, maybe one that was topped by a stone sentinel, bearing an endless list of names of people from that community, many with the same patronyms, who had been lost during the great conflict of 1914 to 1918.
Oh, interesting. I could see how you could get lost in that. That's a good one. You know what? I'm totally going to add that to my... I have a couple extra credits right now. Is there anything else you want to say before I tell you about my pick?
No, go ahead.
All right. Now, I think I've actually mentioned this on the show before, so I apologize. But it is so good. It is so good. And if you've heard me pick it, you already know what I'm about to say. It's The Martian. Written by Andy Weir. And about once a year, I have a book that is so much more compelling than anything I could watch, anything else I could listen to, that it's one that I'll remember for the rest of my life. That is this book. So it starts with a lot of the concepts in this book were really talked a lot by my co-host on the SciBite, Heather. Some of the things her company worked on, some of the ideas and philosophies of how you would actually get to Mars and equip people on Mars and do the surveillance of Mars. And it's not only is it almost, with a couple of exceptions, extremely scientifically accurate, but they managed to make that scientific accuracy actually a compelling part of the story that keeps you on edge. It sounds geeky, but it's amazing. This book is so powerful that something kind of bad happens. I don't want to spoil so much, but something happens. This has never happened to me in a book. I was so emotionally invested in the character that when things went south, I had to put the book down for 3 weeks because I wasn't ready emotionally for this bad thing to happen. And then when I got back into the book again, I kicked myself for waiting because it was so good. It's a book of a lifetime, and I just want to play a sample of it because, again, it's so good. Hopefully, he doesn't swear because it starts with some swear words.
The Ares program. Mankind reaching out to Mars to send people to another planet for the very first time and expand the horizons of humanity, blah, blah, blah. The Ares 1 crew did their thing and came back heroes. They got the parades and fame and love of the world. Ares 2 did the same thing, in a different location on Mars. They got a firm handshake and a hot cup of coffee when they got home. Ares 3, well, that was my mission. Okay, not mine, per se. Commander Lewis was in charge. I was just one of her crew. Actually, I was the very lowest-ranked member of the crew. I would only be in command of the mission if I were the only remaining person. What do you know? I'm in command.
So there you go. That's how it starts. It's by Andy Weir, narrated by R.C. Bray, and he just does an amazing job bringing life to the characters. It's a great example of why audiobooks can sometimes be a great alternative to reading, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes, The Martian. You could also get it on all your other places, but I really think sometimes Audible is the best way to hear some of this stuff. Totally unplanned, unsolicited, unpaid plug, but if you guys need some maybe holiday reading or something like that, When Paris Went Dark, that's my next one, Mr. Dominic. Right now, Spam Nation's my current one, from Brian Krebs, which is also out on Audible. Excuse me. Okay. All right, well, we should probably get to our main topic, which means I'm going to thank our next sponsor, and that's DigitalOcean. This is a game changer. DigitalOcean is amazing. I first learned about it from Mike when he said, hey, do you know that I'm using this incredible service for the back end of my apps, and it's one of our competitive advantages? What are you talking about? What? I've heard of all of the great services. What are you talking about? So I went and looked them up. I made an account. Next thing you know, they're one of our sponsors because they are awesome. DigitalOcean is a simple cloud hosting provider dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way to spin up a cloud server. And we've got a promo code. Oh, you know what? It's probably transition time. I should ping them. So if it's still early December, you can use the promo code CODERNovember. And that'll get you that'll get you a $10 credit, which will give you the $5 rig 2 months for free. Coder November is our transition because now it's beginning of December, so we'll probably have Coder December too. It's really straightforward. You take those codes and you can apply it to the balance of your account. If you've got a brand new account, that'll give you a $10 credit to try out their $5 rig. And for $5 a month, in less than 55 seconds, you're going to get 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, 1 CPU, and a terabyte of transfer on DigitalOcean servers. That's going to be a droplet for you. And DigitalOcean has data centers in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, and London. So you can go global with this and get distributed everywhere. They're really nice data centers. They got pictures up on Instagram. But it's really that interface that makes the difference. It's so simple. And their control panel is massively intuitive, yet very powerful. And you can replicate the functionality of the control panel with their straightforward API. And you don't even have to do it. I mean, yes, you can. You probably can, and you probably would want to. But if you're like me and you're kind of lazy, turns out there's a whole community out there already making a whole bunch of great stuff around that API. It all goes back to that API. So you can really get it started, automate processes, snap it into your management infrastructure. It's such a great interface. You can get up and running in no time, take snapshots, DNS management, one-click installs of things like GitLab, Docker, Rails, all of it. Just click, you're done. On super fast hardware running up in the cloud that you have root access to. And DigitalOcean's getting even better. Sure, they got all that nailed down. Yeah, they invested in SSDs a long time ago. They've got an amazing SLA. I don't think I've ever had an outage. I don't think I have. And they have an SLA of 99.99%. But guess what? DigitalOcean wants to get even better. So they're willing to pay for tutorials. You can get up to $100, $200 for a tutorial. If you've got an idea of something to write up that could help DigitalOcean users, DigitalOcean has editors that will work with you to make it a great piece. And they can pay up to $200. So go over to DigitalOcean.com right now. Use the promo code CODERNOVEMBER. Why it still works. Why not rep for November and give us like a little bing on their charts? Maybe I'm sure they'll have somebody with a big spreadsheet up, and they'll have all the ways people heard about DigitalOcean. Let's make Coder Radio top of that list by using the promo code CODERNOVEMBER. That's a great way to thank them for supporting your favorite podcast. And it's also just a great way for you to try out a DigitalOcean rig for free for 2 months. See why DigitalOcean invested in SSD only, why they use KVM on amazing hardware, all powered by Linux. And you can get started in less than a minute and take advantage of private networking, transfer the images globally. You can even transfer them to clients once you've built something. And they have that simple API, which means if you ever get busy, you're not going to have to worry about scaling yourself. So that API will always be there to help you out. DigitalOcean.com. Use the promo code CODERNOVEMBER when you check out. And a big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. So you and my buddy Chase from Unfilter are fired up about the same thing. And Chase, just to give you background, spent about a year. He got laid off from the Nielsen Ratings Company. And he has a whole bunch of great stories about how Nielsen works, but that's for another show. And he got laid off after working there for, I think, 10, 11 years. Then he spent about a year trying to find a tech job. And producer Eric has also struggled to try and find a tech job. Right? I know a lot of people have been looking for tech jobs for a long time. So to hear Microsoft, who is laying off tens of thousands of workers, say there's a worker shortage, to see Facebook and Mike Zuckerberg, Mike go out there and create a foundation to bring in new workers, you would think we are at a crisis of technology expertise. But Business Week is running an article this week. Mike tweeted it out, too. That's where I first saw about it. The tech worker shortage doesn't really exist, it says. And it all comes from I think the reason this got published, really, the impetus to push it out the door was President Obama's recent executive action, which will increase the number of U.S. college graduates from abroad who can temporarily be hired by U.S. corporations. But so far, the tech sector seems to be unsatisfied with this executive action. Here's the issue. They say they don't have enough workers. But the counter-argument from scholars is the tech worker shortage doesn't actually exist. Here's a quote. There's no evidence of any way, shape, or form that there is a shortage in the conventional sense. This is Hal Zelsman, a professor of planning and public policy at Rutgers University. They may not be able to find them at the price they want, but I'm not sure that qualifies as a shortage any more than not being able to find a half-price TV qualifies as a shortage. A real-life example he points to is the case of petroleum engineers, where the supply of workers failed to keep up with the growth in the oil exploration industry. As a result, Salzman says, just as people predicted, economics predicted, employers had to just start offering more money, and as a result, more people got into the field, and the shortage took care of itself. And he also says you can look at the opposite side of this. Take a look at tech wages. A paper released last year by the Economic Policy Institute says that real IT wages are the same as they were in 1999. Now, if there's a shortage, wouldn't the wages be going up? But if you adjust for the cost of living increases and inflation, real IT wages have been the same since 1999. Zelsman says the real issue is the industry's desire for lower wage, more exploitable guest workers, and not a lack of available American staff. He goes on to say, direct quote, it seems pretty clear that the industry just wants low-cost labor. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Dean Baker. He's the co-director of the Center for Economic and Policy Research. He wrote in an email to Business Week. And by the way, a 2011 review by the U.S. Government Accountability Office found that H-1B visa programs, which industry groups are lobbying hard to expand, Mike Zuckerberg's is one of them, have fragmented and restricted oversight and weakened labor standards in the IT industry. Many in the tech industry are using it for cheaper indentured labor, says the Roster Institute of Technology and Public Policy. And then they go on to say, evidence of an existed labor shortage for Facebook. They said, hey, well, let's contact these and say, let's contact Microsoft. Let's contact Facebook and say, hey, we need evidence for a worker shortage. They contacted Facebook, said, give us your proof. What is the worker shortage? What are you running into? What problems are you having? And Facebook's reply? One sentence. We look forward to hearing more specifics about the president's plan on how it will impact the skills gap that threatens the competitiveness of the tech sector. Now, I just cannot buy off on this. I know more unemployed tech workers today than I've known in 15 years that I've been watching the tech industry.
Yeah, but let me just play devil's advocate a little.
Go ahead.
Right?
Go ahead.
So there are two sides to the coin. One, I know plenty of unemployed tech workers. Two, who made mistakes, right? Who got super into one technology, didn't, and they could get jobs, right? I mean, let's say they were, pick something weird, right? I'm just going to make something up. Programming language Y.
Okay.
And Y just got obliterated off of their local geographic area, right?
Ruby comes along.
And they certainly could get a junior job as a Ruby developer. But, there's the issue of, should unemployment require someone who was a, let's say, software architect or a senior developer to take an available junior job? I actually say it should. I'm a little less friendly to the laborers, which is
so even if it's like, say, 20, 40%, 20, 30, 40% less pay?
Yes, and I will tell you why. I feel like developers in particular have kind of made their own bed in terms of, I've learned over the last year, and we've talked about it a lot, that junior developers out of school don't know anything, yet have this idea that they are entitled to a relatively high salary.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out hiring a junior developer, at least for the first year, is a huge cost, right? It's a huge drain. So I'm wondering, and certainly there is a level of greed going on here, right? Microsoft and Facebook are trying to abuse people, end of story. But I'm just thinking of it from the smaller perspective of, if you have to hire a junior developer and he has to make, 10 grand more than what normal people are making out of college, then you're not really incentivized to train him, right? You're incentivized to only hire ones who have experience and who can actually do the job day one.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've noticed that particularly when I was doing a lot of contracting where I was going into bigger companies, their junior developer always had a year of experience, 2 years experience. Like there was no real, like, I'm fresh out of college. Or if there was, they had done an internship there for 6 months, right?
Yeah.
What used to be the case is there used to be a whole training system, right? You would work in the QA department for a year. You would get trained up on writing scripts. You would do stuff like that.
Yep.
Then you would become a junior developer.
Right.
But you made, $8 an hour.
Right. And you did that starting as young as possible, so that way you got the earliest head start in that because you had to climb that ladder.
But even
if
you didn't, if you got out of college and you didn't do that while you were a student, you accepted maybe they paid you $9 or $10 an hour, right?
Sure, of course.
You accepted that, and you didn't, for lack of a better term, bitch. What I think is happening now is that there's an expectation for a higher starting wage, and employers are trying to, make it back, right? I mean, Facebook and Microsoft are notorious for their crazy hours, right? Like, having said all of my little devil's advocacy, I think kids think that, want to make too much money, and really they shouldn't. It's pretty obvious what they're doing, right? What Microsoft and Facebook are doing.
Right.
I mean, I've seen cases where companies have tailor-written jobs to be like, the salary is $30,000. You have to have a PhD and PhD in software engineering.
Yeah.
Have worked for NASA. Like, I've seen crazy shit where they almost took the guy's resume and went, okay, so how do we write this in a job description? It's
It does feel like from the company side, there is a little bit less willingness to invest over the long term in people too. And it's probably as a response to how fluid the market is now.
But again, devil's advocate, right? You hire these junior people, and what happens? They work for you. They work for you for a year, 2 years, and then they jump ship for the big raise, right? Like, this is a weird, complicated problem, and I almost feel like
there's a lot of things causing it.
Having been on both sides, I could definitely see how. So you want me to pay you what? You want me to train you just so you could work for my competitor? Trained right away. in a
So
year.
do you think this is the market at play putting pressure on employees to lower their expectations because the companies are saying, well, we can go out and get relatively similar talented people for less money?
So I think the pressure is on junior employees, right? I think junior employees definitely need to, lower their expectations. But Emmanuel in the chat room is making a good point. It used to be you worked at a company forever and you got decent pay raises every other year or something like that.
That
right?
seems like the dream.
That's no longer a thing. And again, I can see both perspectives. I wish I could hire people for life. But I have to know in the back of the head when I'm making that first negotiation with someone to hire them that this guy's probably looking, in particular when I deal with people who maybe have worked before, all they're trying to do is add mobile to their resume, right? And they might leave in 6 months. So there's kind of a weird... I think the whole culture of work and the employer-employee relationship has gotten to a place of being a little too adversarial. And certainly the government doesn't help, right? All the regulations, all that kind of crap. When you have American, it's enough to make you cry. Where if you bring someone over from say India, you basically can ignore most of those laws because if they squawk, you send them back home. I don't know. I mean, I see it both ways. The other thing is, like, as a small business, poaching is a huge freaking threat, right? Like,
it seems to me that because you are also on the end of this where not just a single employee you have the problem where entire contracts can go overseas. Isn't this sort of the same issue?
So I think it's a different issue, right? Because, and maybe I'm just naive, but I feel like an employer-employee relationship can be based on mutual trust that, if you're loyal, the employer will have your best interests at heart. You just need a little bit of blind faith. Now, that's obviously no longer the case. Certainly, if I worked at Facebook or Microsoft and I heard this news, I'd be polishing up my resume and leaving.
Wouldn't it be infuriating if you're an employee there?
But my point is that you can't paint all tech companies with the brush of the big companies, right? The actions of the big guys... Because here's the thing, right? Satya Nadella, first of all, he's an Indian himself. So he probably doesn't have any sort of loyalty to hiring, domestic workers, which isn't immoral. It's just something, if you are a domestic worker, I think you need to take into account that they have no, whenever a company says we have a global perspective, that's a bad thing for you. On the other hand, it's not, the burden isn't totally on the employee, right? It should be on the employer of, if I'm going to hire someone, I should have an intended path to keep them for indefinitely, right? Unless something bad happens to the business.
I guess to me, this is where I kind of look at it from the employer standpoint. Like if I'm going to hire somebody, it does not matter what kind of experience you probably have because we do it like nobody else. And so I have to train you. So to me, it seems like what employers have opted to do is instead of investing somebody and sort of moving them up and starting giving them they make a little bit of a bet, maybe pay slightly more than they should, but they hire a domestic person from their local community, and then they give them a step raise increases as they increase their responsibilities. That seems to be the old model, the model that seems to make sense to me. The new model is, well, we instead of starting at square one and train them up to square 5 or square 10, we're going to start at square 6, and if they don't meet those requirements, we'll just go outside the local area. And instead of investing over the long time in somebody, they're just trying to go right to, let's just get the expert. Oh, well, we don't have enough experts, so now we have a shortage.
It's, I don't really understand why this is a problem for Microsoft and Facebook, because they have enough money that they don't really need to worry about competing on salary,
right?
Per se.
Yeah, I know. Right?
I can tell you as a small business owner what my fear is. This is my nightmare scenario, right? I meet a great candidate from our local university. I want to hire him. I hire him. Pay a little more than I wanted to, but actually I got rid of that by having everybody on the same scale. But and then I train him, there's a cost for the first 6 months. Senior people are having to train him, having to take time away from their tasks to get him up. He's expensive. Useless. Yeah. He's there for 7 months. He's only really been useful for 1 month. And then he hands me his, resignation telling me, oh, I'm going to go work over at the, name larger company here, right? So that's straight up a loss. Like that, there is no, no amount of Bernie Madoff creative accounting is going to not make that a loss, and it's not an insignificant loss either. It's a big loss, right? It's not like taking a potential client out for lunch and then having them not sign the contract. It's, it is a huge, significant loss.
Yeah, it is.
So I kind of understand the defensiveness. Now, I don't understand the defensiveness when you have more money than God, and you can just be like, or we'll just pay you double, right?
They really seem passionate about it too. Like Mark Zuckerberg, right? He has a whole foundation around lobbying for this thing. Like it's a cause. It is like a cause for him. It is literally, he has a nonprofit set up around it. It is literally a cause. I do not get that. Because I also don't have a problem with immigration work. I'm not trying to say it has to be exclusive.
So I have a huge problem with immigration work, and let me tell you why.
All right.
In the tech field, Fingertip is in Eatontown, New Jersey, near a university called Monmouth University, right? If we even post a part-time 1099, do this quick assignment for us, maybe we have overflow artwork, right? Skin a couple buttons for us. We get tens to hundreds of resumes, depending on the type of work, from students.
Mm-hmm.
We send it to Monmouth. We get students from Rutgers, another relatively local university, applying that we had no relationship with Rutgers, and we still have no relationship with Rutgers to do that. There are people who at our junior level desperate for work, where as an employer, you can have your pick of the litter.
Right.
It's not that, gee, I can't get anyone in the door. Now, whether they can pass FizzBuzz or not is whatever.
Yeah.
But we're not a big company, right? Like we're tiny. I don't think there's anybody who's going to college. Gee, how can I be so attractive to Fingertip, right? I have to imagine that if Microsoft did the same thing, oh, gee, we have some overflow summer. We need some QA testers for this project for a couple of weeks. Posted it to their local university. Do they not get thousands of resumes?
Of course.
So what's the problem? And in terms of intermediate and senior people, well, if you were hiring people at a junior level, keeping them and training them, nature is going to give you intermediate and senior developers, right, over time.
Gosh, I think this is the problem I have with it, is it feels like, in a way, peeing in your own well. But maybe the problem is despite how much we hate it, there really is a global competition for these jobs. Even as real as that has been, like I think we're still having a hard time fully grasping all of the downsides of that. And the companies are looking at all of the ways that it can be really beneficial for them. And like you said, you've raised some really good reasons why they might do that. Like, it's kind of understandable. That's even more infuriating.
Well, certainly there's no unemployment insurance for, a guy from Chennai, India, right? I'm just saying there are lots of reasons.
Well, and a lot of times, their being here is dependent on their work status. So that is a massive bit of leverage that the companies have.
Let me hit you with another ingredient in the pie here, right? Do you know that unpaid internships recently became effectively verboten in most states?
No.
If you do an unpaid internship and you get audited for any reason related to payroll, you're toast.
Mm.
Unless that intern literally just got you coffee. Well, gee, a 4-week unpaid internship is a great way to train someone on the ropes, right? And potentially get them a part-time then a full-time job.
And get a really good sense if they're going to be a workable part of the team.
Again, a complex problem, but anyone who's raging against the whole H-1B visa thing, as I have done, I strongly urge you to look at your own state's labor laws and your own state's labor policies and see. Of course, they were written to protect people from, the Rockefellers, right? Working people 80 hours a week, things like that, for pennies on the dollar. But is an unpaid internship really evil?
I wouldn't think so. It seems like an education opportunity.
Because in New Jersey, it's evil. I'm just throwing it out there. In New Jersey, it's against the law.
So do you suspect that these kinds of stances will hurt or bolster independent contract work? Could it be that...
Oh, well, so the other shoe has also dropped, at least in my state of New Jersey. The requirements to actually pay someone on 1099 are far stricter than they've ever been. And you get into these situations where if you want control of quality, 1099s get very dangerous, right, very quickly. Because remember, it varies state by state. There's no federal. I mean, the IRS cares, but your state may think differently than my state, right? So Washington might be like, whatever. If you sign a 1099, you're done. New Jersey is not like that.
I guess I find it. See, the chat room is really against free unpaid internships. But that's how I got. That's how I got my start. Right, I worked for free for a year because I was passionate about the work, but B, for me it was a learning experience. And after a year, they're like, "Well, you're so freaking invaluable." By the way, it was a school year, not a full year. They hired me as an actual employee, and they had to like adjust rules to make that work. And I was technically classified as a janitor in the union pay scale.
Right.
But I worked for almost, I guess, I mean, how long is a school year plus the summer as a unpaid intern? That's what they called me. And to me, it was the best thing in my career because it got me working side by side with IT professionals, learning the trade, and making me qualified. In fact, making me uniquely qualified for the position they then opened for me. So I get that, yeah, you could consider it indentured slave labor, but at the same time, it is
to be clear,
a huge investment from these businesses to train a person.
I mean, I agree. You know, it's not all anti-government, right? Certainly, an internship should only be legal for a student. If anyone's trying to give a 40-year-old guy an internship, they need to have their head examined. Additionally, you know, we've had interns. We've always paid them. We've never had an unpaid intern because I'm psychotically paranoid about the state of New Jersey. I just am, because New Jersey is a very, you know, not to get too political, but it is a very democratic state, a very, very, despite the current governor, very anti-employer state. So what happens is if you had an intern that thought he was going to get a job and maybe he sucked, so you just didn't give him a job, well, they could come back and demand the wages. So why not just pay them up front?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and if you're, like you said, like if you're Google rich, that makes sense.
Well, if you're Google rich, I don't even know what the problem is.
Yeah.
That's, you know, the limiting factor in all of this is money. So if you're Google, guy comes in, you know, I'm a senior developer, been here for 10 years, I'm making $100,000. I'd really like $100,000 and maybe 5,000 more a year. Can you do that, Sergey? Can you hook me up? No, sorry, man, we're gonna get this guy from India. I mean, really, that's breaking you?
I guess I am surprised to see how against people are working for free when they're just starting out. It does kind of show me some insight into how there is some problem too on the worker side. I'm not saying anybody should work for free if they don't have to.
No.
But if you're totally green and there's an area you want to get into and this company is willing to invest, you know, time, and that time to even be one of their senior engineers works with you for 6 months, that's you're making money because that's money you don't have to go pay a school or take a course on. I mean, to me, it seems crazy.
That's the fundamental problem junior folks are having, is that they think they're productive when they're in fact a huge cost center.
Right. They think they can come in and immediately contribute something, and so
and
how dare I not get paid?
You know, you didn't get the job because your code sample was impressive. You got the job because you seemed like you'd work really hard, and that when you went home at 5:30, you would, you know, read the Java book on your own time and get better, right? And I don't know. I mean, I feel like a curmudgeon hating on the young people, but I've seen less and less of that kind of thing. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, if you're going to get a job at Jupiter Broadcasting, there's a good chance you're going to have to work for free for a while, because it's not, see, like in a really small business, a lot of times if you want to work there, you have to create the revenue stream to pay for yourself. Like, that's not an uncommon thing. So if we bring somebody on, there has to be a way to afford that person. And sometimes the way to afford that person is by the work that they do to get the revenue to come in the first place. And it's like a training process at the same time. So we're vetting them and training them, and they're getting experience, and they can still put it on the resume.
I remember when I got my first part-time job in college doing Java applets, you know, the lady who did the actual hiring, she wasn't the person I worked for, but I guess she was like some sort of manager who had to approve it. She handed me a Java book and said, I hope you're reading this at night and on your own time, because you won't last very long if you don't. That's fair, I think, to do to someone junior, right? I think that's, you know, I mean, programming is a trade, right? If you don't want to learn your trade, then sorry. If you were a carpenter and you blew up some guy's house, or a plumber and you blew up some guy's house, and the plumbing company fires you, reasonable. It just seems... I don't know. I guess sometimes I feel like IT people are kind of, in terms of other types of laborers, they have it the best, or we have it the best, and we bitch the most.
Yeah. There is, I guess, it definitely matters. Like that the audience of if you should work for free or not. Like, for the audience, it's going to totally depend on each individual scenario and situation. Like, honestly, if I was just starting out and I was 17, 18 to 25 years old, I'd probably work for Googs for free because, shit, I want that on my resume. Yeah, I worked for Googs for a year. They didn't pay me anything. But, like this, there's all these, everybody's complaining about they having all these requirements, and then now somebody's offering to check it off on the list. Now, you have to be in a very unique position to do that. Maybe you still have to live at home or have another, I'm telling you, I understand. I was able to do it because I was a student at the time, but it was a huge part of me getting my start. And I think it would be, when I look at my business now, it's just the nature of a small business. Now, when you go to something big like a Microsoft or a Google, it would be great if they could pay an intern. And I think in most cases they do, but I just don't get the total refusal to work for free for a little while. But yet,
right,
you
not
could
paying
contribute.
interns. I mean, $8 an hour or whatever it is in your state. I mean, New Jersey's like $8.70.
I mean, maybe, and I wouldn't totally be opposed to it if it was doable. If the company was in a position to afford that kind of thing, I would actually like to be able to give somebody a little bit of money. That would be my preferred way to go. But in reality, when people need jobs, and the people that are hiring can't afford them yet, what else are you going to do? And there's that. There's the experience problem. There's all of it. And so just to hear the complete total refusal to work for free, it does sort of change my perspective a little bit. That
Well,
all
I
said,
think what it is the market is trying to basically lower at least junior wages, right? Maybe senior wages are okay, but it's definitely trying to lower junior wages. And I strongly feel that IT work is a trade, not a profession, which is a big, big difference. Because in a trade, you're someone's apprentice for 3 years. You basically get a job where you're taught and you understand that they're doing you a favor by giving you the job. And I see a lot of cockiness in kids just coming out of school. Well, I'm going to go rewrite Facebook.
I think you could do an informal survey. I think ask people that are in a good position now and ask if they've ever worked for free for a little while. I know personally in my life, a lot of people that that refuse to ever work for free are people that are continuing to struggle because they don't see there's other values outside of just monetary gain. I mean, it's a hard thing, though. I know it's really hard.
It's super hard, right? We shouldn't go on much longer. And there's the whole other aspect, though, of depending on your state, if you're in the United States,
I know, yeah.
The government may be so onerous on the employer that the employer has to.
And it's also, it's pretty unreasonable if you're maybe in your 30s, you have kids, you're older than that, and you have a rent to pay. I mean, then it's not as feasible.
But I still really believe that at the end of the day, the ideal situation is we get back to the 50s. And I know that's going to be quoted and people are going to hate me.
Yeah.
But we get back to, when you went to work for Gillette, you were a Gillette man and that was it. You didn't go shop around next door. Even if Mach or whoever the other razor company was going to pay you more, you just didn't do it. Right? Because until we get rid of this adversarial relationship, at least as a small business owner, it's hard for me to invest in people. Because even an investment of $10,000 is significant, right?
Yeah,
and that's what it comes down to is that I have no idea what Google's problem is again. So
yeah, and Facebook.
I can tell you what my problem is.
Mike's got all that Facebook stock money. I'm not sure what his problem is. Oh, I'm sorry, Mark. I like that I call him Mike though. That's my new thing.
Right.
I agree with Mr. Dominic.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is, people go to, like Alex talking about, if they go to decent school, yes, the Harvards and MITs of the world are in a totally different, place. But there are far more people at local state universities, local private universities, and technical schools that need work that can't go in and make $70,000.
I think the fundamental premise of the Business Week article is going with is that the big IT companies are really doing it so that way they can pay less is fundamentally true. There's a lot of reasons and a lot of contentions for those reasons and a lot of good reasons on both sides for them, though. I think that's kind of where we're at. And it's just it's going to be a long transition still. I don't feel like we're even in the middle of that transition. Yes. I think it's maybe
and never,
towards the
ever
beginning.
hire anybody from Kansas.
Right. Of course. We all know that you can't trust them.
Yes.
Mr. Dominic, is there anything you'd like to tell people about or anywhere you'd like to send folks throughout the week?
Yes, I would like to send them to remember the 5th of November.gov.
Jeez.
Little ironic, but
I would say, how about that contact form over jupiterbroadcasting.com/contact? Send us in your thoughts on this topic or coderradio.reddit.com. And why not join us live, jblive.tv on a Monday, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar to get that converted to your local time zone. And go check out Fingertip Tech, too. Why not? Maybe they could solve something for you. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for tuning this week's episode of Coder Radio. We'll see you right back here next week.